newspapermen meet such interesting people. They know the lowdown, now it can be told. I'll tell you quite reliably off the record about some charming people I have known. For I meet politicians and grafters by the score, killers plain and fancy, it's really quite a bore. Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people. They wallow in corruption, crime and gore. Ting-a-ling-ling, city desk, full of press, extra, extra, read all about it, it's a mess, meets the test. Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people. It's wonderful to represent the press. Now you remember Mrs. Sadie Smuggery.
Welcome to the Media Project, an inside look at media coverage of current events. Hi, I am not Rex Smith. I'm Judy Patrick, former editor of the Daily Gazette in Schenectady. I'm filling in for Rex. With us today is Barb Lombardo, former editor of the Saratogian and an adjunct professor now at the University of Albany, and WAMC host and producer and UAlbany adjunct professor as well, Dave Agostina. Hey, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, Judy.
Yeah. So, Barb, what's on the top of your mind today?
We need to talk about the Washington Post and what it means to the future of journalism on a larger scale.
Yeah, and what about you, Dave?
Well, what about what happened in the exchange between CNN's Caitlin Collins and the President of the United States? We have the audio. You can listen for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. We even got a letter this week asking us to get into the Washington Post layoffs. So let's go there. Washington Post announced this week that they were going to cut 30% of its workforce. That's across all departments. The Washington Post is, at least among us, among journalists, has long been considered an institution in journalism. You know, it stood for fearless reporting, for holding the powerful to account, and the idea that democracy cannot survive without a free press. It's owned by Jeff Bezos, one of the richest people in the world, who has a $500 million yacht, but for some reason could not sustain the losses that he was incurring running the Washington Post, despite the fact that he paid $75 million for a Melania movie, which we will discuss later. So what's happening with this, Barb? What made you unhappy about this?
Oh, boy.
Everything.
A lot of it made me unhappy. First of all, their motto is democracy dies in darkness. They're killing this in broad daylight. So there we go. And at the same time, I want to be very careful about what are they losing and what are they possibly gaining. That I understand that it's a business. I don't think the fact that he has money to burn and he's one of the richest people on earth should be the reason that he needs to dump more money into what might be a financially money-losing proposition. But it disturbs me that he is one of the most powerful men on earth and doesn't have any kind of a commitment to freedom of the press and to telling the truth. I'm very disturbed by the cutbacks of the reporters around the globe. We don't know what's going on around the globe unless we have seasoned, smart, backed up reporters in dangerous places. And I think that's going to be one of the most critical losses.
To me, Jeff Bezos is a guy who licks the index finger and holds it up to the wind. And when he saw the Trump administration and where they were going, he said, okay, I'm going to make this newspaper so that they're happy with what I'm doing. Just follow the evidence. Barbara just mentioned foreign coverage going from where? The Middle East, Jerusalem, Cairo, Turkey and Iran, Ukraine, China, South Asia, Central Europe. All those international investigations gone. Do we have any issues with those places in the world? We certainly do.
And did you see that they were notified of their layoff by email and they're just left behind?
The reporter in Ukraine posted on social media that she had gotten laid off, and she was noting that it was so cold where she was that she had to write in pencil because the ink in her pens had frozen.
When you're laid off at a local publication, and this I'm sure is the same way in other businesses, not just in journalism, you immediately are cut off from the operation. You no longer have access to your computer. You no longer have your credentials. You can't turn the lights on. So you're stripped of everything that ties you to that credible employer.
And despite that fact, the Olympics reporter, one of them that was laid off and is already there, said, well, I'll still do the coverage anyway.
You know, we're all realists in this room. We know that sometimes you do have to cut because the expenses get out of control. And I mean, the idea that at one point a few years ago, they had as many as 1,100 journalists, that's an incredible number of journalists. Now, with these cuts, they'll be down to 500, still a fair amount of journalists, but they're cutting whole sections. The book section will go, the sports section will essentially go. And I understand the need for things to make money, but a lot of these wounds were self-inflicted. I mean, they lost 250,000 subscribers because they pulled their endorsement of Kamala Harris and people got wind of it. And then they renamed their opinion section, moved it to the right, and now they write editorials. Once in a while, they're doing a good editorial, but I think today they had an editorial about how Walmart was wise to do the kind of downsizing that it had done. It's just they focus on personal liberties, I put that in quotes, and free markets. That's a Jeff Bezos thing. I mean, he's contributed to the...
That's a GOP thing.
Yeah, a GOP thing. I mean, Bezos has donated to the new White House construction project. He was on the dais when Trump was inaugurated. He and his wife had like a $25 million wedding. Certainly, I think he could afford to, because the Washington Post is an institution that means more. It's not just a thing that produces widgets or sells books or delivers kitchen utensils to your doorstep. It's an important institution.
Well, they brought down a president.
Yeah.
They brought down a president, Nixon. And now they have someone who you could argue in the White House is doing even worse things. And they've gone to support that.
Can I mention one thing
Sure.
about the delivery of widgets? And this really irks me, that people will bemoan the loss of a lot of the coverage from the Washington and whole sections of the Washington Post. And yet, when they're done, they'll go order something off of Amazon. This is where Bezos is making his money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a difficult thing to do. I understand that people rely on Amazon to be able to get things that they can't get locally. But that's a place to speak up.
Well, it'd be interesting to see how many people will speak up.
You know, the great Ruth Marcus, who used to work for the Washington Post, left and now works for the New Yorker. She left in part because they spiked one of her editorials. She quoted Citizen Kane in a column she wrote about this, you know, where the advisor is talking to Thatcher and says, you know, honestly, my boy, don't you think it's rather unwise to continue this philanthropic enterprise, this Inquirer that's costing you $1 million a year? And Thatcher says, you're right. Oh, Thatcher was the advisor. You're right, Mr. Thatcher. I did lose $1 million last year, Kane replies. I expect to lose $1 million this year. I expect to lose $1 million next year. You know, Mr. Thatcher, at the rate of $1 million a year, I'll have to close this place in 60 years. God bless him.
It's fantastic.
Bezos could have run it for a couple of millennium at that pace.
Well, instead, I think this is important for the audience to hear. He's laid off people who are covering, get this now, race and ethnicity. That's not a problem right now, what's happening with ICE. National health is not an issue surrounding health and return of measles and strange recommendations. Protest movements? Well, they're all domestic terrorists. Activism and extremism they're not going to cover. Education, climate. I mean, what are we talking about here? If this is a political agenda right now that he's following and basically saying, okay, President Trump, let me just take away the things that you'd like us to take away and make the paper in your image.
Yeah, the one good thing I'll say about it is that he seems to have left the investigative unit intact. So they will still have a powerhouse of an investigative team covering Washington politics, but they may think that's where the clicks will come from. We will see.
I don't know what the laws are in their venue for when you're laying people off. And if you've got X number of reporters and you're eliminating jobs, which is what they're doing, then technically you're not supposed to then just give someone else that beat. Those are really serious, important beats that you're talking about, David. And are they going to double up on some other reporter's beat? The person who used to cover whatever it might be in one of the suburbs could now cover some of those issues? I don't know. I'm skeptical.
It didn't have to be like this. Why doesn't he just create a nonprofit to run it or sell it to somebody else? But I guess the point is he's making it the way he wants it. He's got the power, he's got the money, but he just doesn't want to spend the money on the Gazette. And you know, they had such high hopes that he was really going to do this for the Washington Post. And the Graham family entrusted him with this wonderful institution.
And he started but with sort of grand plans, didn't he, Judy?
Yeah, he did. And he tried it for a couple of years, and then they had the great success during the Trump administration because everybody loved reading Trump news. But after Trump left office, subscriptions split. But then they kept on trying different things, and they would fail. They wouldn't follow through. They had, a different publisher come in, the guy from England, Will Lewis.
That's right, yeah, Will Lewis, who had his own scandal.
His own scandal that followed him overseas. So another good story.
And do people care about sports coverage that would come from the Washington Post? That's a rhetorical question, I guess. I don't really know the answer to that.
That one didn't bother me as much because they said they're going to do features now, basically, for sports, which is, that seems to me okay.
Which is kind of what the
scores
Times
you can get anywhere.
Which is what the New York Times is doing through The Athletic. They're not really trying to cover sports. They're not covering games. And there's some pluses and minuses about how that pans out, too.
But it's also, guys, and let me get on my high horse here for a second.
Get up there.
You're in that for-profit media, right? Why is media in a for-profit model? That's why you end up with situations like this. And yet we in public media, we're not perfect, obviously, but we're also attacked. So all fronts now are being exploited in the media, and it's so much harder if you gotta make a buck to not fall to the whims of a president, for example.
Well, it's clearly the connection to Trump that stands out as the motive behind all of those changes. David, I remember a few, was it weeks or months ago, where you were taking a lot of guff. The station was taking guff because
for getting rid of sports.
Didn't have the sports scores reported.
Thanks for reminding them of that.
But people can get those in various places, so it's a different kind of a coverage. What he's doing is brutal.
Yeah. So 2 journalists were arrested by the federal government, Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, both covering the protests at a church.
But weren't they impeding the service, the church service?
Both covering the protest at a church service in Minneapolis. I was especially concerned about this because it takes it to a whole nother level. 3 judges in another court had said, no, there's nothing here. There's nothing to arrest him. There's no case here. But the Justice Department went to a grand jury and got an indictment. And these are genuine federal charges. These reporters could go to jail. We like to think, that'll never happen, but I'm sure it's causing some consternation. And the other thing is it's a chilling effect. I mean, everybody's worried about it now.
Yeah, and who doesn't know, who pays attention to any news, any commercial news, who Don Lemon is on CNN? He's a journalist. You see him in the church asking people questions. This is exactly what Judy just said. We're trying to chill the press and use the levers of power to just cause trouble in the hopes that it makes them self-censor.
The White House celebrated those arrests on White House public sites, making light of this. This is horrible and really serious. And people may or may not know Don Lemon. They probably don't know Georgia Fort, but she could. She's an independent journalist doing serious reporting and very credible reporting. And to have someone covering an event get arrested, even if the charges are dismissed, as you said, that's a chilling effect. It's harassment of those people, and it should scare all of the media, all of the public. Anybody can be arrested for being in what the government's considering to be the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right. These independent journalists don't have the resources, the money they need often to defend themselves in court. So it can really be devastating to them. The other issue is, whether or not I've seen this so misinterpreted or people have been so misled online about what Don Lemon and what Georgia Fort actually did. If you look at what they actually did, they were not protesting. They were just covering the story.
And they weren't preventing the church service from proceeding.
Right.
They were covering the protests there.
And there can be cases where a reporter can be charged with trespass, but typically that's what they would be charged with because it's on private property. There is that part of it, but typically that would be the worst of it, and almost always it would be dismissed because the magistrate would see that they are just the reporter doing a job.
So in light of this, Barbara and Judy, after the discussion last week you had about the sort of rules that reporters should be cognizant of in this new climate when they're covering protests, even when you are just fulfilling your role as a journalist, you could get arrested.
Yeah, it's nothing to fool around with. The power of the federal government to do this to reporters, I mean, it's a new level of alarm, I think. That this will not be the last
The Minnesota publications and radio stations condemned what happened. There should be condemnation from every quarter.
They should also be condemnation from the journalists who are at White House press conferences for the way they're
hang
spoken
your
to.
head in shame.
Oh, yes.
Well, I guess we should let them have it, huh?
Yeah, let's listen to what happened with Caitlin Collins of CNN.
A lot of women who are survivors of Epstein's are unhappy with those redactions that came out. Some of them, entire witness interviews are totally blacked out. Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. I heard that, and you're telling me something else. No. I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else, really. Now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
But what would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten
healthcare,
justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about. Yeah, what did you say? Go ahead,
What would you say to the survivors who feel like they haven't gotten justice?
You are the worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. She's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile on your face.
I'm asking you about survivors of Jeffrey Epstein,
You know why
Mr.
you're not
President?
smiling? Because you know you're not telling the truth. And you're a very dishonest organization.
Well, there it is.
Oh my gosh, that makes me mad all over again.
It's so
I was
enraging.
Horrified when I heard it the first time, and I'm even more angry now.
So we're unhappy at two levels, though. We're unhappy
least.
with the president's treatment of a journalist, but we're also I at least can say that I'm very unhappy that her colleagues, the reporters elbow to elbow with her, did not stand up for her. I heard when she went back on the air at CNN, Jake Tapper was very supportive of her, but the reporters in the newsroom at that press conference were not supportive.
This is after Quiet Piggy, the remark he made against another journalist.
Yeah, that seems like nothing compared.
Well, and the idea that you have a president of the United States with that bully pulpit,
Bully, the operative word.
bullying and attacking the press, calling an organization dishonest because he doesn't like the question that's being asked. And we are already demonized anyway. The press knows we're up against it. But now you add this layer into it, and what you see is the press being damaged. Again, trying to chill the press, the president attacking a specific member, and not to mention the as far as I'm concerned, sexism. And why aren't you smiling? Because you're a young woman.
And I think that not only did she need to retort then, although I feel for her, where you're being
She was professional.
admonished by she was professional to the end, still trying to ask her question. I'm wondering if there was a point to say, I can't believe this is coming out of your mouth as the President of the United States. It's a losing battle if you say something. But where's the rest of the people in that room, the rest of the press corps? Should CNN and the rest of the press corps even be bothering to go in for their daily shaming?
My wife, who's not a journalist, said this, and I know we've kind of talked about this in the past, and I mentioned to you, Judy, earlier, but I think you too, Barbara, but what about the other journalists following Caitlin Collins, just all asking that same question again? Right. That's a good way to stay on it and to honor her and to make a point, but also say, no, we're not going to stop asking you this question just because you don't like it. We're not chilled because you attacked her. We're going to double down and ask you again.
Yeah, and if you know you're not going to get an answer, then everyone can stand up and just say, enough of this.
Have you no shame?
There you go.
And it was a perfectly valid question. And top of the mind for a lot of people, especially for the survivors of the Epstein scandal. They deserve answers. It's a developing story. And his approach to dealing with reporters, especially women reporters, it seems to be getting worse. Caitlin Collins, I mean, yeah, right, she was very professional about it, but man, that was brutal. And at the same time, we hear, efforts to sell CNN and, to maybe bring it under the Paramount control in which, a friend of President Trump, of the Ellisons, that family, would have greater control and squeeze the coverage even more. So kudos to them for standing up to it. They get a lot of grief over their coverage, day in and day out. But I think in this case, they held their head high.
Caitlin Collins was totally professional through this whole debacle, and I do applaud her for that. everyone else needs to stand up with her, including her employers who are more worried about other things.
Well, and the other thing is, and this is what bothers me so much, is that he lied again. He said, well, it's not important anymore because I'm not in it. You're in it. We learned you're in the new release 5,300 times, and all the past sexual allegations against this president, and yet that gets let go. No one says, but wait a minute, Mr. President, you're in the document 5,300 times. Please tell me where the conspiracy is.
And he's not going to answer that question. He's not going to answer any question.
But we need to be asking these
Yes,
questions. We need
again
to
and
not
again.
not want to get the wrath of the president because we're scared he yelled at this person. So I'm just going to stick to my question because I don't want to become the center. But we're going to need a lot of people with guts to just do the right thing and say, you explain this to us.
Because the worst thing that can happen is that they get barred from covering.
That should be an honor.
Badge of honor. And it's really the president that needs the media and actually craves the media attention.
Exactly. Hey, let's talk a little bit about the search for Savannah Guthrie's 84-year-old mother. What a sad story. When it first cropped up, I thought, well, this is just another, missing adult, probably with a memory issue. But as the story developed, it captivated the interest of the nation and it had so many quirks to it. And the Today Show was put in the probably uncomfortable position of covering itself. So how do you think we all did, or they did?
Well, some people I heard, I won't mention any names, saying, come on, why do we got to cover this? There's only one reason they're covering this, and it doesn't make any sense. And my argument was, well, if prominence is a criteria for what makes news, if someone who's well known is going to get covered more because they're more newsworthy, of course you're going to cover this. And when you look at how the press covered it, they cover it like any other tragedy, really. Yeah, it's hard for the network itself to cover it, but they have people there. We learned that she spoke to the president, who offered all sorts of help from law enforcement. But what I find interesting is, and I don't know how you guys felt when you got into the news business, but when you did you think, well, by being in the news business, I never have to become a news story. I'll be in control. But the truth is, it is a rule, an ethic in journalism that you've got to be prepared to become part of the news. We are going to cover you if you make a mistake as well. You don't escape the spotlight if you are also a journalist.
And conversely, if you're facing a family tragedy where a missing abducted mother, you're going to become part of the news just by virtue of your celebrity status. And there are other missing persons cases that are not getting attention. I'm imagining there must be. But I understand the difference here is that Savannah Guthrie is a national figure, and I thought they did a good job with the coverage.
And that may be why. We don't know this, but because she's so well known, if it is an abduction, that may be why. Because they know that she's perhaps a wealthy person who's in the public eye, who they can get ransom from.
Yeah, the mystery of it is one of the things I think that is pushing this to the top of the of the news feed, and the fact that the mother was on the Today Show with Savannah quite a bit. All right, let's finish up with Melania, the movie. We have no popcorn, but
Bezos. We're back to Bezos, right? How much did he spend?
$75 million. Part of it for the Melania production company. The other part was to promote it. It did fairly well the opening weekend. Of people who have seen it have panned it. I haven't heard
Some
a good
funny
review yet.
unofficial commenter said something to the effect that even people watching it on an airplane would walk out.
And what about the director?
Yeah, and the director,
Brett Ratner.
The Epstein buddy, possibly.
possibly.
He was run out of Hollywood for his sexual exploits. So, in light of everything that's going on, there's that little extra context to put in there. But the greatest thing I heard this week was Fox News and their journalists interviewing Melania.
We can always count on them for a hard-hitting interview.
Listen to these incredibly hard-hitting questions as they talk to Melania about her documentary, if that's what you call it.
How does it feel being First Lady for the second time around? It's quite extraordinary.
What is your favorite part of the movie when we all go to watch it this weekend?
When he's doing the YMCA, how do you feel?
Fostering the future AI. I mean, what haven't you done?
Tell us about the future.
I've always been curious. What is your favorite time of day?
Hard-hitting questions.
I have, as an immigrant, how do you feel about what's happening with immigrants across the country? Maybe that would be a good question. Or what are you doing as a first lady? What's your agenda nowadays?
Or in the movie when she talks about wanting peace around the world as her husband divides and conquers, why not ask her about that?
Well, that's clearly not what this was going to be about. So there's not worth putting a lot of attention into any of this as far as I'm concerned. It's just a vanity project that doesn't deserve a lot of discussion except to brush it off as a vanity project. And I think it's regrettable that the First Lady of the United States doesn't have any projects and isn't doing something to make the world a better place.
And the fact that when she does have a White House event, this week at least, she was plugging the movie. I doubt that Jeff Bezos is going to get his $75 million back. Maybe he will. Maybe this is a new Star
Is it going to
Wars.
get reviewed in the Post? Do they have any
reviewers left?
Yeah, there's no book. It's not a book.
Well, we shall see. All right, that's all we've had time for. I know.
How could
time
that be it? What's your favorite part of the day, Judy?
My favorite time is when the Media Project is on.
3 o'clock on Friday, 6 o'clock on Sunday, anytime at WAMC.org.
Oh,
this show will never be an hour.
Well, thanks to Barb Lombardo and David Castina, I'm Judy Patrick, and thanks for all of you who listen. Be sure to join us next week for another exciting edition of the Media Project.
Union to get a living wage. They joined with other actors upon a living stage. Now newspapermen are such interesting people. When they know they've got a people's fight to wage. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, newspaper guild, got a free new world to build. Meet the people, that's a thrill, all together fits the bill. Oh, newspapermen are such interesting people. It's wonderful to represent the guild. Now you remember Mrs. Sadie Smuggery. She wanted money to buy a new fur coat. To get insurance she employed skullduggery. She up and cut her husband's only throat. She chopped him into fragments, she stuffed him in a trunk. She shipped it all back yonder to her uncle in Podunk. Now newspapermen meet such interesting people. It must have startled poor old Sadie's unc. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, city desk. Hold the press, extra, extra, read all about it. It's a mess, meets the test. Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people.
The Media Project is a national production of WAMC, Northeast Public Radio. This week's projectors include Judy Patrick, former Vice President for Editorial Development for the New York Press Association and former editor of the Daily Gazette, and Barbara Lombardo, adjunct professor at the University at Albany and former editor of the Saratogian. You can listen to the Media Project anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm your producer, David Gastina. Thanks for listening.
Upon a living stage now, newspapermen are such interesting people. When they know they've got a people's fight to wage. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, newspaper guild, got a free new world to build. Meet the people, that's a thrill, all together fits the bill. Oh, newspapermen are such interesting people. It's wonderful to represent the guild. Now, publishers are such interesting people. Their policy's an acrobatic thing. They claim to represent the common people. It's funny, Wall Street never has complained. Ah, but publishers have worries, for publishers must go to working folks for readers and to big shots for their dough. Now publishers are such interesting people. It could be prostitution, I don't know. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, circulation, ting-a-ling-a-ling, advertising, get those readers, get that payoff. What a headache, what a mess. Oh, publishers are such interesting people. Let's give 3 cheers for freedom of the press.